We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Saturday, but we're recording on Friday, and it's very fortuitous. We have a lot of shit to talk about. And because we have such a heavy load to carry, I thought I'm going to need some help with this motherfucker. So bring in Ed. If there's anybody that can help carry this load, it would be Ed. So welcome back to the show, Ed.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Busy, busy, busy. I mean, there's an old, I think it's Jewish curse that went, "May you live in interesting times." Well, by golly, we're the recipient of that. We are definitely in interesting, in a bad way, times, right?
Yeah, no question about it. Now, I got a note, and I don't know if this is accurate or not. I hope it is. We're recording this at about 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time on Friday, which will air tomorrow. And we do that a lot because that's when Ed's available. Um, we heard that Judge Engeron from the New York civil court, the Letitia James lawsuit, was going to come out with his number today of what Donald Trump owed. And I didn't know if it was going to come out early or later. I said, we'll just do the show. If I have to do an extra part, if it comes out later, we will do that. But I'm hearing now, and I don't know if this is verified or not, that we're going to hear something around 11:30 our time, if that's true. Then we'll be right in the middle of the show. And if we watch what's going on, we can pass that along to folks right away and be right on top of this motherfucker, just like, well, not like the media, but like the Rational Boomer podcast. What do you
There you go.
let's not even talk about the Engeron thing yet. Let's see what happens with it. Then we can discuss that. We got other shit to bring up. What are you thinking?
Well, we got to touch on Navalny's death in Russia. I mean, Putin's been, in the news again lately, but just simply because what a sycophant that Trump is of Putin and many other Republicans. It seems that the Republican Party, especially the House Republicans, are as much in Putin's pocket as they are in Trump's pocket because they are doing their level best to make sure Putin wins in Ukraine, which, in my mind, makes every member of the Republican House a traitor to this country because they are giving aid and comfort to our number one enemy, which Putin still is. And you can talk about your Chinas, you can talk about your North Koreas, but the seat of evil is and has been since World War II in Russia. And now it's in Putin, period. Anyone who supports Putin in any way, anyone who is against Ukraine in any way is a traitor to this country, and they should not be able to hold office. They should be rounded up. I mean, I think Joe Biden should test out this presidential immunity thing and round them up and
Yeah.
ship them to Guantanamo for a while.
I would go as far as saying that anything bad, any further bad that goes on in Ukraine, the death of Alexei Navalny, Republicans are complicit for all these things because they've let Vladimir Putin run roughshod. Donald Trump started it in 2016 when he believed Vladimir Putin over our own intelligence agencies. They've let them run fucking wild. Now, you brought up the fact that this opposition candidate to Vladimir Putin, Alexei Navalny. He came on the scene, kind of a younger, good-looking guy, has said all the right things, seemed to be more reasonable than Vladimir Putin. He seemed to be a threat to Vladimir Putin, so immediately Vladimir Putin puts him in jail. He was poisoned a couple of times, then he disappeared for a while, then he ended up in some more remote prison, and today he died. Now, people are surprised by that. It's the big news. For me, I'm surprised it took
Yeah.
this fucking long. His death warrant was signed
Yeah,
the
and we
moment
have
he came back to Russia.
exactly. That's exactly right. And let me point out that he was not some Western sympathizer. He was not somebody who was against Russia. his thing was pointing out that Vladimir Putin was nothing but a thug who made himself fabulously wealthy, probably one of the richest persons, if not the richest person in the whole world, by stealing Russian money.
Right.
And one way he stole Russian money was to buy condos from Donald Trump in New York to launder the money that he was sending out of the country. So Trump and Putin have been like this for a long, long time, and not just Putin, but other Russian oligarchs as well. The whole Trump Tower is infested with them. They own probably 60% of it. And what they don't own, other oligarchs from around the world do. So it's always been a money laundering operation. It still is. Trump is in Putin's pocket. You saw how he acted when he was in the same room with Putin. Every time he does, he's like a dog. And Putin is so in charge. You can tell every time.
Donald Trump in a room with Putin is a lot like me in a room with my wife. Head cast down, just waiting for the next order. I'm kidding. Anybody thinks I'm giving my wife shit, we give each other shit all the time. But it seems like Donald Trump from the beginning idolized Vladimir Putin, aspired to be Vladimir Putin, and he still does. You might remember in the immunity case in the appellate court, the judge was a little frustrated by what Donald Trump's team was complaining. And she asked, "You mean to tell me that a president could tell SEALs Team 6 to go shoot his opponent and he'd be immune from that?" And frighteningly, his lawyer said, "Well, yeah," which is exactly what Vladimir Putin is doing now with Navalny. So Donald Trump aspires to be a murderous dictator. And anybody that sides with Donald Trump, once you know that, you are complicit in treason in this country. I don't care what anybody says. If that isn't the definition of it, I don't know what the fuck is.
Absolutely. And an addendum to that, just yesterday, I think, or maybe the day before, it's in very recent history. The Department of Justice has charged Mr. Smirnov, the chief witness against the Bidens in the Burisma quote scandal, with lying to the about the Bidens and their involvement with Burisma, the Russian energy company. Flat out lies. They have charged him. He will be going on trial for it. And this is the chief witness for the Republican Biden witch hunt in the House. So what does that tell you?
Well, that's exactly it. We've been watching. It's all about the Republicans trying to get back at Joe Biden for everything that's being done to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's as much as said, "Why is everybody investigating me and not Joe Biden? He was president." Well, the big factor here is committing fucking crimes. You committed crimes, Joe Biden hasn't. So they had to manufacture these crimes. And they had hearing after hearing. They were embarrassed each and every time. They were asked if they had evidence, and they said, "Well, no, but we're sure there's something there, so we'll keep digging." And then they bring this star witness, this Alexander Smirnov, who is not tied to the vodka company, by the way. I just want to let you know that's a common name in Russia. But it's ironic that he's Russian.
Yeah.
And they have him testify. Yeah. He is the star witness that says Joe Biden got a $5 million bribe. And as luck would have it, we find out he lies. And the DOJ is indicting him on lying. What has to happen with the Republicans before they let this fucking go? They've been embarrassed every time they open their mouth, and they've been proven wrong every time, but they are absolutely shameless. You could show them how stupid they are, and they would just come back and do it again. It's like a dog with a fucking bone. You tell him no, and he keeps coming back. It's the same thing with these Republicans, and I have to question the intellect of these fucks.
Well, you said it early on there. This was just a payback to Biden for the impeachments of Trump, which were based in reality He was impeached twice. He should have been convicted both times, but the Senate is full of Republican cowards, cowards, or they would have convicted him both times. Of course, if they convicted him the first time, he wouldn't have had a chance for the
Right,
second one.
right.
But he should have been convicted definitely the first time. And since they passed on that, they certainly should have the second time because he was trying to kill them. He was sending a crowd in to murder them, and yet they're so cowardly they could not convict him.
Yeah, it's something I've asked before. You know, we've got Republicans in the Senate, and not all are dumb. But the fact of the matter is, they keep siding with Donald Trump, even though they know for a fact that he's going down. You can't sit and look at the situation we're looking at now, or even then, and see a bright future for Donald Trump. Eventually, it's going to catch up with him. And why they would want to ride that train going off the cliff, I don't know. Is it a matter of fear of the Trumplafucks or the media, or they're just so caught up in the cult that they can't help themselves? I don't know what it is, but anybody with a logical mind would say, oh, this is a bad horse to bet on, and I'm getting the fuck away from it. But they won't.
Yeah, I mean, all we're seeing now is Chris Christie, who's out of the presidential thing, and Nikki Haley, because she has nothing left to lose, who are speaking out against Trump on the Republican side. Of course, Liz Cheney comes up every now and then, but everybody else is scared. They're scared shitless that he will zero in on them and then and say this person is a rhino, and then their political career is over because the Republican Party has become so radicalized, and there's no other word for it. I mean, Joe Biden is always careful to say the MAGA Republicans, as if there's a difference between the MAGA Republicans and the rest of the Republican Party. But the fact remains that around 76%, if you believe polls, which we shouldn't, and I'll touch on that again in just a minute, but a huge number of Republicans still believe the election was stolen, still support Donald Trump. So his word, unfortunately, among these blithering idiots, which is what you are if you're a Republican who supports Donald Trump, you're a blithering idiot. You heard it here. There's no other way around it. They're afraid that his word will go to these people and will tar anyone so that they cannot retain their office or gain the office if they're running for the first time. So yeah, pure fear on their part. Cowards.
It's interesting to me that Republicans will try to make the distinction between MAGA and the regular Republicans. Now, there might be some difference in ideology, but the fact is, if you're giving comfort and help to the MAGA fucks, you're just as bad. Let me put it this way. If you're going to rob a bank and three guys in a car, two guys get out of the car and rob the bank, and those robbers come out, get in the car, the third guy races away to safety. That guy driving the car is just as guilty as the two robbers that went in with guns. And that's the way it is for the Republicans. You can try to separate yourself some, but if you don't actually separate and denounce what is going on and try to get yourself away from it, you're just as guilty. I'm sorry, you might not think that's fair, but that's the way it fucking goes.
Yeah, and to expand on that, if while they're in that bank, those guys shoot somebody and he dies or she dies, the guy driving the car is charged with murder too. I mean, in the law, there is no distinction because they are part of the overall crime. Therefore, they're guilty of that. So, yeah, if you're supporting Trump, and let me just say this, the Brookings Institute just came out with a study of COVID and said, due to the actions of Donald Trump alone, about 800,000 Americans died from COVID. They lay it right at his doorstep. And if you're familiar with the Brookings Institute, they're not a fly-by-night organization. This is a very reputable research group. So if they say it, it's true. Well, Donald Trump is guilty of murder of 800,000 Americans.
Well, and so often the case, you know, when the economy comes up, they had the greatest economy ever. if not for COVID. You can't blame Donald Trump for COVID.
Mhm.
And the fact of the matter is, I do blame Donald Trump for COVID, not for it happening or starting
So
to
do I.
spread, but Donald Trump, as president of the United States, had a certain amount of responsibility to do something, and he did nothing. In fact, he discredited the whole thing in the beginning, said it didn't exist. Had Donald Trump done something like Joe Biden might have or Obama might have, we would not have seen 1 million people die. And like you say, the Brookings Institute suggests that Donald Trump is culpable for 800,000 deaths. I mean, how do you even address that? Well, you know that's true. I know that's true. A lot of normal people do, but the
Mm.
Republicans keep thinking that this was a conspiracy by China and the Democrats to wipe out Republicans. That's what they fucking believe. And it's absolutely ridiculous because we didn't wipe out enough Republicans. Just saying.
Yeah, it's a failure. We
That was a
knew that one.
failure.
Now, here's the thing, though. The Trump was another thing he did was that because of the Ebola thing that happened during Obama's tenure, they set to work and came up with a game plan for future epidemics. And they put it all together into a very workable plan. Do this now, do this now. Plus, they had people on the ground in China and in other countries to be able to work immediately at the source of these things. Trump threw that all out. He
Yeah.
threw out the playbook. He canceled the programs that would have had people in place to cut it off early. And I was reminded of this whole thing because my wife and I were in Paris when the first glimmerings of this started up. And all the tour guides and everything, and all of the museums and so forth, told us you're very lucky with a French accent to be here now because all the Chinese tourists are at home because of this pandemic thing they're having, or this illness that is originating in China. And we got back home just before it broke. I mean,
Right.
just before it went big. So we were very lucky there. But yeah, that could have been nipped in the bud much earlier. Things could have been shut down much earlier so that the disease didn't spread as quickly. And probably would have saved those 800,000 lives, and that's a conservative estimate in my book.
Well, the comparable pandemic was in 1918 when all those people died, and it was a horrific
Mm-hmm.
pandemic. And I said, if it's
Spanish flu, yeah.
Spanish flu, right? And then I said, while we were going through the pandemic, I said, how is it possible that the United States has learned nothing about managing a pandemic in 100 years? And that's a reasonable question. Fact is, we did understand it. We had a committee to handle this stuff, which Donald Trump disbanded, and he chose to do nothing. It isn't like we didn't know what to do with it. We just had a fucking nutcase at the wheel, and he refused to do anything about it because he was afraid that it was going to make him look bad in the upcoming election. That's the difference. This guy was negligent. He was complicit in all of this, and he doesn't get enough blame for it. I'll be honest with you. This should be the one thing that shuts him down forever, the deaths of all these people that were absolutely unnecessary.
Absolutely unnecessary. And he continued deep into the pandemic. And when the president, and if you're a Republican, a guy that you have some regard and respect for, is telling you it's going to go away in April when the heat comes back. It's going to be down to 15 cases in a week. When he's putting this kind of thing out there, you tend to believe him. I heard people here where I live. Well, it's not so bad. It's just like a bad cold, just like the flu. And for some people it was, but not for two of my relatives and four other people I knew personally here.
Yeah.
Who one guy was dead in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Another guy, a relative of mine, lingered for 3 months on a ventilator in a hospital. I question how long he was still alive, technically. But he was there on the ventilator for 3 months, and what a trial that was for his family. But he was one of those guys. I ran into him at the grocery store. I was masked. I said, "Where's your mask?" And he said he basically poo-pooed the idea. And then before long, he was within 2 weeks, he was on a ventilator.
Wow. Wow.
Which is tragic.
It is tragic. And hopefully we don't experience something like that again. But at least I know with Joe Biden in office and the Democrats in control, it'll be handled much better. I wanted to talk about Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley said something this past week that kind of annoyed me. She was talking about Donald Trump.
You sure you don't mean Nancy Pelosi?
No, I mean Nikki Haley in this case.
You sure you don't mean Nancy Pelosi?
but the fact is, she's starting to strike back.
Just checking.
She's starting to strike back against Donald Trump. She doesn't feel our military would be safe in the hands of Donald Trump as president. Yeah, you fucking think?
No.
But then she also said that she believes that Joe Biden should resign for the good of the country. Now, what bugs me about this is the fucking audacity. This bitch hasn't won one primary and has no prospect to win any fucking primaries in the future. I personally think that after Super Tuesday, she's gone because nobody's giving her any more money. She has the audacity to act as if she's a candidate. She's not even fucking close, and she's yapping her mouth. The only thing she's hoping for is that Donald Trump keels over and dies. That's her only hope of being the nominee. And even then, I have a feeling that if Donald Trump did keel over and Nancy Pelosi, now you got me fucking doing that. Nikki Haley would probably still be replaced because she happens to be a woman of immigrant parents in the Republican Party. There's no room for that kind of mess in the Republican Party.
Yeah, let me throw this in real quick. I just found this out today. The guy who the special counsel who was investigating Joe Biden with the documents that were found in his garage and so forth, who basically did a hit job on Biden about his memory and so forth, and basically said, I'm not charging him because he would come across as a feeble old man, so nobody would convict him. This was an obvious hit job.
Obviously.
Guess who he's connected with?
Well, I know he's Republican.
He's connected with.
Go ahead.
Steve Bannon.
Ah, big fucking surprise.
He is connected. He is connected to Steve Bannon. Yes, they share the same lawyer, as a matter of fact. So yeah, there's a Bannon connection to the guy who was badmouthed, this special counsel. Now, come on, Merrick Garden. Who appoints a guy like this?
Well, that's exactly my point. When it first came out and this report was read and talking about Joe Biden's memory, the first thing I thought is, that sounds like an insidious Republican messaging weaseling its way in to say the right thing at the right time. That's too fucking weird.
Yep.
And some people said, well, no, he's, Merrick Garland appointed him and all that stuff. But and I have to say up front, when Merrick Garland was appointed, I liked it. It sounds like he was the right guy. But since he's taken office, he's been nothing but tentative, if not complicit with the Republicans to a certain extent, not so much directly, but giving them the time and the space to build cases. We need somebody more aggressive than that. But the interesting thing about Merrick Garland, you bring up a good point. Why does he hire this guy? Why does he hire this guy? More importantly, this is another story I heard too, is that report was given to the White House before it was released. And Joe Biden and his staff obviously were annoyed by what was going on here because it was uncalled for. It was out of line. It was over the fucking top. They showed it to the White House. The White House expressed their displeasure, and Merrick Garland still fucking released it. I got to tell you, I personally think if Merrick Garland didn't have all these cases going on and the election wasn't coming near, that fucker would be out on his ass because Joe Biden was pissed. And after the election or after the cases, Merrick Garland's on the fucking road. I think he has to be. We need somebody more aggressive as an
Yeah.
attorney general.
Yeah, he will not be back for the second Biden term,
No.
which I still believe is inevitable. But yeah, I actually think that number one, he should never have allowed the Hunter Biden stuff to go forward. Obviously, there were no reliable witnesses. He had to know that. He had to be able to take a look and say, "Well, there's no there, so I'm not going to let this go forward." And you know, if they want to have their little committees in the House, that's fine, but I'm not getting the DOJ involved with this. You
Right.
know, I mean, Hunter Biden hasn't done anything except be a drug addict and not have real good judgment for a while. That's the extent of it. But I mean, is he worse than Don Jr., coked up online every day? Probably not. I'm getting a call from Farmington, Utah. I wonder what that's all about.
I'm sure it's about
I don't
the
know,
warranty.
but anyway, it'll be done in a.
I'm sure it's about the warranty on your car because I get those fucking calls all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I don't know anybody in Utah, period. So
No, I get tons of calls of people that I never fucking answer. So if somebody's out there gets my number and calls me and I don't know who you are, I ain't fucking answering. I just don't waste my time doing that. But
me,
you know what the interesting thing about it is the special counsel that backtracked and went after Hunter Biden is going after Hunter Biden
yeah.
is the same special counsel who just asked the DOJ to indict Alexander Smirnov for lying in the hearings about Biden. How fucked up is that? This guy's going after
There you
Hunter
go.
Biden, and now
Yeah.
he's indicting one of the star witnesses for lying. What does that do to the whole Hunter Biden, Joe Biden case? We haven't heard much about the impeachment for Joe Biden as of late, but this has got to fucking disappear, like everything else the Republicans do.
Yeah, well, you know, we all know all of that. They know that they can't impeach Joe Biden. They even know they can't, well, although they did impeach Mayorkas. Um, there are no high crimes and misdemeanors in Mayorkas. There's nothing even close to that.
No.
So the fact that they brought an impeachment is an embarrassment and will always be looked at that way in history. Only the second cabinet secretary ever to be impeached, and the other guy resigned, I think, before they actually did it. But still, I mean, all they are doing is killing time. That's what all these investigations are about. They do this so they don't have to do anything on gun control. The biggest killer of children in this country now is firearms, and more so than traffic accidents, more so than any illness, more so than cancer. It's the guns, and we do nothing. And Trump was even bragging about that the other day. We did nothing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that should be the Republican slogan. The Republican Party, we do nothing, at least nothing constructive, right?
You and
ahead.
you and I have both written a lot of commercials in our time, having to be creative, having to come up with stuff.
Yes.
I would love to be the copywriter for all Joe Biden's presidential commercials. All I have to do is take clip after clip. I overturned Roe v. Wade. We did nothing about gun control. All I need to do is take those clips, wrap it up with a couple of lines, and that's devastating commercials. It would be such an easy fucking job to make Donald Trump look stupid because he's such a big help with it.
Yeah, just get you an AI program and say, give me every stupid thing Donald Trump ever said. You'd be working for weeks with that material. But I mean, I've got another one. I don't know if you want to talk about it now.
Sure,
I
sure,
mean, we've
sure.
got so much on our plate, but I just noticed something that Trump said the other day. Now, this is something he's alluded to before, that he is going to, and I believe this is actually a Stephen Miller. Remember him? I call him Grivna Wormtongue, about the guy in the Lord of the Rings who always
Yeah.
stands behind the king, and he's the power behind the throne, snivelly little weakling wizard weasel. That's Stephen Miller, and I believe this is his baby. That Trump has already promised to have the biggest deportation in history, in that he's going to get rid of all of the illegal immigrants, throw them out of the country, plus anybody who supports Palestine now, he says, even if they're American citizens, whatever,
Yeah.
But, he beats whatever drum he can come up with. But his idea is to take red state National Guard and send them into blue states, into the blue cities that are sanctuary cities, for example. So he's going to take troops from Kentucky, Mississippi, wherever, send them into New York and California to round up illegals. Now, a couple of things you would think wrong with that. He wanted to use federal troops, but I guess somebody finally explained to him, without the Insurrection Act, you can't use federal troops. It's illegal because of something called the Posse Comitatus law that was
Right.
passed in 1878, that says essentially that you can't use federal troops as in a police action within the United States. Now, the only time I can think where that was maybe not used without the Insurrection Act was when Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne into Little Rock to back up the National Guard, which he had nationalized to
Right.
integrate the high school there, Central High School, I believe it was. But if you'll remember back when the BLM protests were going and they came to Washington, there were lots of pictures of National Guard standing on the troops of on the National Guard troops standing on the steps of the Capitol with rifles and bayonets, gas masks. It was a very formidable looking troop. It turns out that Trump actually, as president, has control always of the Washington, D.C. National Guard. They're almost
Right.
like a Praetorian Guard. But at the same time, during that period, he invited red states to send him more troops, and many of them did. 11 states responded and sent troops there. Now, the problem is that once you nationalize National Guard, once you federalize National Guard, then Posse Comitatus kicks in, and they still remain under the control of their individual states. So you can't use them in a police action. But by putting them under the jurisdiction, these other troops under the jurisdiction of the DC National Guard, and then Trump, of course, controlling that, he was able to control them as well and send them against the Black Lives Matter protesters. So I'm assuming that's what he is thinking he will do should he be elected, that he will actually create this force of red state National Guard under the DC National Guard and then send them into these blue states. He's looking to start a civil war, I do believe, because if Trump starts, if you're in California, if you're in whatever state, Illinois, and Trump is sending these National Guard troops into your state to round up people who may or may not be illegal, because who's going to know, really, right?
Right.
What are you going to do? Are you going to stand by and watch that, or are you going to send your own National Guard against them? I don't know. It's shaping up to be a fight that I don't want to see. Still, the easy way around this is to make sure Donald Trump never gets anywhere near a position of power ever again, because
Well,
he's really thinking that he's never leaving once he gets in there.
honestly, I don't think Donald Trump thinks that much. He just does whatever is expedient to him at the moment, but he's also um, susceptible to eviler smarter minds around him to be manipulated to do and say the things he wants to do. I think that's what's got him into the problems he is. I mean, he's a sick and weak man in the first place, so that makes it easier for people who are truly evil and maybe have some intellect to manipulate him to do their bidding. And I think that's part of it. But I get some kickback. I've said before and I'll say again, I see zero path for Donald Trump even coming close to being elected president. I don't think he'll even be the nominee because I think the pressure will be too much. We're going to hear sometime, anytime soon, about how much money the state of New York is going to take out of him. And that is going to be a gut punch. It's going to take the winds from his sails. It's going to steal his brand away from him. So I don't know that he makes it to the nomination. But people always say to me, you shouldn't be so confident that Donald Trump won't be president because it could happen. How? I Give me one way, one path that Donald Trump wins the presidency because of all the great support and votes he's gained in 2020? No, that's not it. Because of all these crimes, people will have sympathy with him? No, it'll just be the opposite. I don't even people say, well, you're setting yourself up. Everything I've ever said and technically predicted is all based on logic and facts. If these are the facts, then this can't happen. No way Donald Trump could be president. I know you're not always as confident as I am about these things, but you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And quite frankly, my confidence got a little boost here recently with this congressional election in New York to
There you
replace
go.
the disgraced and tossed out George Santos. Day before the election, all the polls were telling us that it was neck and neck. It wasn't even a point difference between the Republican and the Democrat. And then the Democrat just creams this Republican. And it wasn't even a contest. What was it, 14 points, something
Yep.
like
Yep.
that? So once again, the polls were wrong. So any polls telling us that Donald Trump is going to beat Joe Biden are simply fictions. It's who they're asking, it's the way they're asking. And any number of people will tell you polls this far out have always meant nothing. And that's what's going on now. But the media keeps repeating it because it's controversy. It encourages the Republicans and it deflates the Democrats. It makes them anxious. So people watch to see what it is, what the poll is saying, right? And it's saying nothing, people. It's saying nothing. Just get your ass to the poll, okay?
Yeah,
Just get
exactly.
your ass to the polls and vote blue, and there's no problem.
Well, as I've said before, when I heard this special counsel put out this report about Joe Biden's memory, I see the polls, which are
Mhm.
inevitably always wrong. To me, this is just the Republican strategy. Somehow, in some insidious way, get into the
Yes.
narrative and spew stuff in hopes of creating chaos or scaring the Democrats. Some people have said to me, well, if you seem so confident, then Democrats won't vote. So you need to scare them. And I explained to them, I said, the fucking media does that every day. I'm not going to insult my audience to the point
That's
where I
true.
have to scare them to do what they know is right. If you're listening to the Rational Boomer podcast, I guarantee you're fucking voting in November. I don't have to scare you to vote. And if you want proof of it, just look at the 2020 election. Unprecedented amounts of people voted because they were fearful of Donald Trump. In 2022, unprecedented amount of people voted in the midterm because they wanted to vote against Donald Trump and the people they supported. And if you think it's going to get any better in 2024, throw in Roe v. Wade and some of the crimes and the ultimate convictions. It's just all messaging and they're trying to scare people. But as far as I'm concerned, people of a reasonable mind know what the fuck is up and aren't going to be clouded by the noise out there because that's all it is fucking Republican noise.
Right, exactly. And they use things. I mean, like Trump's also saying he's going to send troops into the crime ridden Democratic cities. Fact of the matter is, New York City is 0.2% lower than the national average. You
Right.
know where the crime rate is highest? Texas and Mississippi. That's where
Right.
it is, not in any blue states. That's where the crime rate, the murder rate we're talking here, the murder rate, 23.7% in Mississippi, 8.9% in Texas, in New York, 5.2, nationwide, 5.3. So that's where the crime is, people. Educate yourself. Anything that comes out of Republicans' mouth is a lie, and not just a lie, but a damn lie. Just
Absolutely.
remember that.
Absolutely. Well, Ed, let's take a quick break. We got some more shit to talk about. Hopefully some other news will break while we're doing the show. If not, we'll get to that at some later point. But we'll take a quick break and we will be right back. We're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Ed is with me today. We've got a lot of news to talk about. We're waiting for some breaking news. Whether that'll happen while he and I are together here on the show, I don't know. But of course, we'll cover it regardless of when it comes. Ed, the big news of the last couple of days has been this Fani Willis thing, this hearing that's going on down in Georgia about her potential ethics violation. She is said to have had an affair with a guy who's under her employ. And that's a big thing. Donald Trump he's spouting the fact. He goes, "Oh yeah, Fani Willis is the biggest story in the world. Everybody's talking about it. It's such a tragedy." No, motherfucker, it's you that's going down in New York and in DC and in Florida. It's you that's the big story, but he'll do anything to try to distract. But you know the story behind Fani Willis. Once again, this is just Republican messaging, trying to find one morsel of something that they can exaggerate and expand and try to turn it into something. Their track record hasn't been very good because they failed every time. And I have a feeling in this particular instance, they're going to fail again, especially with who they're up against in Fani Willis.
Absolutely. Number one, it's a Republican hit job. It has absolutely nothing. I mean, okay, she had a relationship with the guy. Big fucking deal. They're both adults. I'm sorry. Trump raped a woman and had to pay her beaucoup bucks because of defaming her. There's, I think, a total of 26 other women who accused him of various and sundry improprieties and so forth. So if you want to start trading improprieties of a sexual nature, I mean, it's no contest. All right. Now, what they seem to be saying is because she made money on the deal because he was kicking back money when they went on vacation, which is just bullshit. I mean, that came out yesterday. I almost expected the judge to say, "Are you done with this bullshit yet so we can get on with this?" Because that almost was his attitude at some points. Like, are you going to keep asking the same questions all day?
Right.
I mean, that was essentially what he was saying yesterday afternoon. There's nothing here. It never should even have gotten this far. And as she said, when she was on the stand, "I'm not on trial here. These people are the ones on trial. Don't forget that."
Right, exactly. And here's the funny thing about it. The only thing they have to hang their hat on, if they hope to gain anything in this trial, is to show that Fani Willis hired this guy to make all kinds of money and then they shared the money. That's essentially what they're trying to say. First of all, this guy is getting paid no more than anybody else on her staff. This guy took a cut in pay to take this job. Now, let's say it's true that she went on trips or dinners or what with this guy. She claims she paid him back and she claims she used cash. Now everybody's going, "Oh my God, 1,000 cash, 2,500 cash." I don't know. I'm not a rich guy, but that's not a lot of money. If somebody says, "Mike, you need to come up with 2,500 cash," I'll find a way to come up with 2,500 cash, especially if I know about it in advance and I put it away and do whatever I do. I don't know why that's a big "I got you," because that's just ridiculous. But here's my question. When you work for the radio station we worked with, okay, and you got your paycheck.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Once they paid you that money, that's your money. That's my money when I got paid, right?
Right.
So is the company that paid you responsible for what you spent? I mean, if you went and bought meth with it, they aren't going to come back to the employer and said, well, you're at fault because he bought meth with it. No, it's his fucking money. Once he's paid, it's his money. And if he wants to pay for somebody else, whether it be his boss or whoever, the point is, what does that have to do with the fucking case? It has zero to do with the case. Now, she says she didn't do that, and I trust her. Here's the thing about Fonnie Willis. I always said she's a bad bitch. And I say that with full respect. But if there was any question about it, she proved it yesterday. She had a subpoena about her testifying, and the lawyers up there going, "Well, we want her to testify. We want her to testify." Like she's not going to come, and they'd use that as a guy. I got you. But here comes Fonnie Willis walking in while they're saying it. Runs right up to the witness stand, says, "Let's go, bitch." And you could tell that the lawyer
Yeah.
was confused by this. This isn't what I was expecting, and I'll guarantee you Fonnie Willis knew that, and that's why she took advantage of that yesterday.
Let me throw another thing in there. When my wife and I went to Paris, what did we do? We went to the bank. We got the number of euros that we thought we would need, and we took that with us, so we didn't have to deal with credit cards. Now, a lot of it was prepaid. I mean,
Right.
we were on a tour, right? So a goodly portion of it, including meals, was prepaid. Tickets to the museums and that sort of thing, and were prepaid. But there was some side stuff we knew we'd need money for. There were meals that we'd have to pay for. So we got the euros. We took cash. And
Right.
anybody who's done any international traveling at all knows that you're going to want to do that. So you don't have to worry, because number one, a lot of credit cards will charge you an extra fee if you use them in a foreign country, unless you have a credit card that lets you do that without a penalty. So, yeah, you want to get some cash. And that's exactly what she said. Whenever I travel internationally, I get cash. And usually I use dollars because you get better bang for your buck, which is true. You're
Yeah.
not supposed to in some cases, but most people do. I mean, they will take your dollars seriously, because usually they're worth a little bit more than the local currency, no matter where you are. So, yeah, I mean, that's simple. I mean, that's just what anybody who knows what they're doing does. Is they have some cash on hand.
Well, and say you're in Paris and you go into the Louvre and you want to
Yeah,
get and you want to get some crazy Rembrandt fucking sweatshirt. You need the fucking cash to buy the
right.
sweatshirt. You don't want to put that on a credit card.
Exactly.
But again, the whole
Exactly.
the whole point with
I
Fonnie
do have
Willis,
one, by the way.
I know you do. And no doubt some mouse ears tied to Rembrandt, but no, is it Rembrandt or is it Van Gogh? You get the Van Gogh mouse ears, but you only get one side because he cut off his ear.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
But
It's a joke.
he'll be
Yeah.
here all week.
Oh, wait.
Yes.
Yeah. But the whole point of it is what Donald Trump's team has to prove, that there was some kind of financial impropriety that discounted her or discredited her from being on this case. And what I saw yesterday, when she testified, they have not made that point at all, not even close. And it's so typical of the Republicans. Let's just make a claim, but we have no evidence. And that's pretty much what happened yesterday. I don't see Judge McAfee disqualifying her from this case. There is no evidence. I mean, they had her dad up there today.
None.
There's no evidence. It's just a time waster. It's trying to create some discredit for Fonnie Willis. And like is always the case with Republicans, it never fucking works.
Exactly. And that's been their trial. I mean, if you look at Republican administrations since Reagan, since Nixon, Reagan, George W. Bush, and Trump all had multiple convictions,
Right.
in the dozens. Reagan had a lot because of Iran-Contra, and Nixon had a lot because of Watergate, and Trump had. I think Trump's got the record of 86. I think that's number one. So at least or he's in contention for number one if he's not number one, of people in his administration who were convicted of crimes. He pardoned most of them, but they were convicted. So that just tells you all you need to know. I mean, you see Carter won, and that was for a guy who kept a watch he shouldn't have. And then Clinton had 2, and Barack Obama had none, no convictions in 8 years.
Yeah.
You know, and here comes Trump with 86. Boom. So these are criminal administrations. You got to look at it and say that, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire.
There was one unforgivable crime that Barack Obama committed, and we have to address it. He was black.
The tan suit.
Yeah, no, well, not even
Yeah,
the tan
and he wore a
suit.
tan suit.
Right, but he was black, and
But he
I'm
was
I'm
black, yeah.
I'm convinced
You know.
many of the things we're dealing with now, with the racism, the white supremacy, is
All of it.
was payback for having the audacity of electing Barack Obama president. It really is. I mean, I don't care what anybody
Absolutely.
says. Fucking racism and white supremacy and all this shit is absolutely rampant through this country. I mean, there are people that won't claim to be racist, but if you sit and listen to them a little bit, they are tainted. They are racist, even though they don't believe it. Oh, I like black people, just not living in my neighborhood. That's pretty much the case with people of my old neighborhood and your old neighborhood in South Minneapolis. Good, salt of the
Oh.
earth, working class people. A lot of motherfucking racist rednecks in that
Racist as
motherfucking.
hell.
Yeah, it's getting better because it's
Oh
becoming
yeah,
more.
and I mean,
It's becoming better because we're getting more millennials and kind of gentrified in that area. So
yeah,
the people are changing there. But when I was there in the 60s and 70s and 80s, wow, I had no idea how bad the racism was, because back then it was accepted.
yeah. Well, you know, and there were, even though the neighborhood was integrated when I lived there to a certain extent, it was still mostly white.
Yeah.
You know, you had to go down by Lake Street before you started getting into any sort of ethnicity, really. And then you had your white old hippies and some black folks and some Hispanic folks and some Asian folks down around that area, and Powderhorn and so forth too. But you know, they had black people had been confined to North Minneapolis for so many years. It was habit. I mean, they were redlined out of everywhere else pretty much until the 60s.
Right. Well, North
When
Minneapolis.
I got there in the 70s, it was still that way.
Right. Well, in North Minneapolis, it was a very wealthy, affluent Jewish section, and then when that went to seed,
Right.
it became a cheaper place to live, and a lot of black folks moved there. In where we lived in South Minneapolis, you know, I lived in a more white area closer to the river, but there were areas close to the railroad tracks by Hiawatha. A lot of black folks lived there because
Mhm.
houses were cheaper, and up
That's
by
true.
Lake Street, Powderhorn, like you mentioned, it was kind of segregated even in the 60s and 70s. So this whole racism thing's been around forever. It seemed to go under the rocks for a while, and Donald Trump has brought this to the surface like a fever fucking blister. And it's something we need to deal with. And I'm glad it's brought to the surface so people understand, because there's a lot of white folks saying, you know, I think racism has really gotten better. Well, yeah, you would, because you're fucking white. But if you were black,
Mhm.
you'd know it's not any better. It's just a little more fucking subtle.
Well, if folks would like to go visit my TikTok at Holler Troll, I have an explanation of the idea of white privilege that you can listen to and see if it's not something that makes sense to you. And that is where the pushback is. That people feel like their white privilege is being taken away, and they are very reluctant to let it go. At the same time, they're claiming it doesn't exist.
Right. Well, the thing about it is there are white people out there that say, I don't have white privilege. I had to work and struggle. I've been poor all my life. Well, if you say that, you don't understand the term white privilege. It has nothing really to do with income.
Exactly.
It has to do with just the way society is. And, white privilege, the idea of getting rid of white privilege is something that's going to happen after over a long period of time, because we've got to change culture. We've got to change society. And it's like the Republicans always complaining about cancel culture. Like there's some committee that is in charge of canceling people, and we just got to do away with them. It's about public opinion, public perception. Like I've
Right.
always said with cancel culture, here's the deal. You do something fucked up, you get canceled. The only way not to get canceled is don't do something fucked up. So it's on you to not get canceled. And the fact that you get canceled, you might bemoan that fact, but it's the way it is. That's the way society is. And the same thing with white supremacy and racism. Until either a culture dies off or they're re-educated, it's not going to change.
And my great disappointment was I thought that beginning with my generation, the baby boomers, as we experienced college, came out of college and so forth, I thought a lot of the battles were won. I thought that we were on the road to eliminating racism, to installing civil rights for everyone. I thought we were on board ending these corporate sponsored wars all around the globe because we'd stopped one. I thought, well, they'll think twice before they do it again.
Right.
But of course they didn't. We didn't win the war. We just won a few battles, and then we went and did other things, and we didn't keep our eye on the ball. So I fault my generation for claiming victory way too early, and it just went underground. It just people pretended they weren't racist because it wasn't popular to be racist. But then here comes Trump waving the racist flag, and it's cool to be racist again. So here we come out from under the rocks. The roaches came out from under the sink, and somebody's got to turn the light on and put them back under there. That's all I can say.
Well, the easiest way to determine if somebody's racist is if they say, "I'm probably the least racist you have ever met." That's a motherfucking racist. Yeah. That is absolutely
exactly
a racist. And it's kind of frustrating. I don't want to suggest that the likes of Martin Luther King and all of the activists back then and since then haven't made progress. They have, and it's been very impressive.
Absolutely.
I've said before, one of the reasons Martin Luther King is one of my greatest heroes is because he decided to fight back against insurmountable odds. They were a minority. They had no rights. They had nothing going for them, yet they still decided to fight. And they did make some progress, not enough progress, but I mean, I think back to the 60s and the idea of seeing an interracial couple. Oh my God, how the fuck did that happen? And if you ever spent time watching the movie or the documentary about the Lovings, this white man married a black woman in Virginia or something, and they basically took him to jail. You can't fucking do that, as well as any homosexual relationships, you'd go to jail for it. It's not like you'd be canceled or looked down on. They literally fucking put you in jail. So the fact that we were able to get a little beyond that, it was one thing to see a black man dating a white woman. All the white men were immediately troubled by this. Oh, they're stealing our white women. Back in the day, you rarely saw a white man with a black woman, and now it's more common. And you know what? The world hasn't fucking imploded. They have nice families. They have beautiful kids. What the fuck is the problem? But back in the 60s and 70s, everybody would have looked, whoa, how did that happen? That's not right. And that was the attitude back then.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the South, I'm sure, and maybe Northwest and East, for all I know, had misogyny laws. It was against the law to marry someone of another race. Now, people tended to look the other way if it was a white Japanese marriage, let's say.
Well, that's okay.
I saw that. I saw that sort of thing when I was a kid, but black white, no, that was against the law for sure. And it wasn't until the Loving case, when those laws were canceled. But remember, they were canceled on right to privacy, just like Roe v. Wade was based on right to privacy, just like gay marriage is based on. And we already had Clarence Thomas saying, "Well, we're going to have to look at all this other stuff based on privacy because we just blew Roe v. Wade, or we settled the Dodge case. Let's put it that way. Put it all back to the states. So that would literally let states make things like gay marriage and interracial marriage illegal in a particular state if it's sent back to them, like the Supreme Court probably wants to do."
The interesting thing too is you never hear the Republicans talk about this, but when we talk about right to privacy with regards to Roe v. Wade, they forget to acknowledge the fact that right to privacy was used in gun registration too. So if you can overturn Roe v. Wade, theoretically, we can make people fucking register for the vote. You can't have it one way and not the other.
Yeah. And perhaps that's what we should do, because then they'll squeal like pigs and say, "No, you can't do that." But
well, and of course, yeah. we had this situation in Kansas City. The Chiefs win the Super Bowl. They go back to Kansas City, have this celebration. They're excited, they're happy, they're jubilant because they won the Super Bowl. And then we get 3 fucking incredibly violent people that start shooting, I think long guns even, and injuring 23 people and killing at least one person that we know of. And I said to people, I said, well, it certainly wasn't the Kansas City fans so happy they needed to shoot people up. San Francisco people didn't come to Kansas City because they were mad about the game. So it seems reasonable that it's likely some Trump-la-fucks that are upset about the conspiracy between the Kansas City Chiefs and Taylor Swift trying to take over the country. That sounds crazy, but that's the attitude they have. And I don't even know that was the case. It sounds like there was some kind of fight amongst some people and they just shot willy-nilly. But I still blame the Republicans for this, and here's why. Missouri has incredibly loose fucking gun laws. Absolutely loose gun laws.
Right.
Now, when this shooting happened, there's talk of Andy Reid, the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, helping some teenagers and maybe some of the other players, helping people get to safety. That's what Heroes did. The governor of that state, Mike Parsons, who's a big gun nut, he's a big NRA and Second Amendment nut. He thinks everybody should have free guns and as many guns as they want and do whatever they want. He was at that event too. You know what he was seen doing? Running like Forrest Gump away from the crowd. Now they had 800 cops there.
Of course he was.
Good guys with guns, and that didn't help, because if somebody wants to pull a gun out and shoot a bunch of people, you can't stop them fast enough, especially if they have semi-automatic weapons. But here's why I blame the Republicans. Regardless of who did the shooting, the reason they had access to those guns is because of Republicans, a Republican coward governor, and this would never have happened. So they say, what do we do to fix this? Well, we have people with guns, good guys with guns. Well, you had 800 police officers there. It didn't work. So what's the other option you could do? I don't know, take guns away from fucking crazy people, but they don't want to do that.
Well, in that same vein, we had the lady who shot up Joel Osteen's church the week before. Her son got killed that she dragged along, or I don't know if he died or not. I know he got shot, dragged along. Now, this was a woman with a history of mental illness, but that didn't stop her from getting an AR-15 and going to shoot up a church. I guess it's a church. It's really just a money-making scheme for one guy.
Now, is that in Oklahoma?
Still.
Is that in Oklahoma? Or?
I'm going to say it's Texas, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is Texas. It makes sense that it would be in Texas.
Send your money to Del Rio, Texas. Yeah, that used to be the when Mike and I were in radio. You had all these religious programs that were self-paid, and the AM radio stations would suck them up to play on Sunday, so they didn't have to pay anybody. And they all seemed to be in Del Rio, Texas, where you
All
sent
right.
your money to support them.
I just checked it out, and he's in Houston. But the Texas
Yeah, that's
gun
what I
laws are
thought.
no
Yeah,
better than Missouri, and it's funny. We have more shootings
and
in
this
Texas than any place else in the country.
right, and they always say, "Well, Illinois got all these gun laws, doesn't do any good." Well, Wisconsin doesn't.
Right.
It's right next door. Oh, I think I want 12 guns. I think I'll bop over to Milwaukee and buy a few, or I'll go to the gun show down in some smaller Illinois town, out in the hinterland, and buy 10 or 12 guns where nobody can, nobody's checking even my ID. How many you need? Here, take another one. Take another one. If you're near a state that doesn't have that has lax gun laws, you might as well be in that state. That's
You
what
know,
it comes down to.
one of the things that pissed me off too is there was some talk. There's always scandal, especially or gossip. Travis Kelsey, who is a superstar on the Kansas City Chiefs, he's 34 years old. He's dating Taylor Swift. Um, a day or two after the shooting, Travis Kelsey was in some get together or party for the win. Some I don't know what it was, and he was having a good time,
Yeah.
and he was drinking, and he was wild. And people had the audacity to say, "Well, how dare he get jubilant and party after a shooting like that? How dare he?" But they don't go to the governor and the Republicans say, "How dare
Right.
you let this fucking happen?" I mean, here's a kid who played football. He won the biggest game of his life. He's got the best girlfriend ever, and he's enjoying life. What's he supposed to do? Sob over this? I'm sure he's upset about it. I'm sure he feels bad about it, but he also knows there's nothing he can do about it. We're placing blame on a young guy who's on a winning streak, celebrating that, and we're disregarding the motherfuckers that made this happen.
Right. And you made a point earlier that there were 800 cops there, right?
Right. That's what they
Well, I
said.
think
Yeah.
what people need to remember is 99% of the time, police are to punish crime. They are to catch criminals after the fact. They
Right.
do not prevent crime for the
Right.
most part. What they do is clean up afterward and try to catch the perpetrators, but they are not proactive in stopping crime. If they were going to be proactive, I mean, people who want to be proactive try to cut off the reason for the crime, and in so many cases it's just the access to guns to people who shouldn't have it.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on down in Florida because it's kind of interesting. We're talking about the classified documents case in Florida. Judge Aileen Cannon is the
Right.
judge who's biased toward Donald Trump. She's trying to slow walk this thing, and she ran up against Jack Smith's recent filing about something she was going to do. She wanted to release the names of witnesses, which could only be for the sake of intimidating witnesses, because Donald Trump's done it a million fucking times. And he basically sent a filing and said, "Listen, if we do this, if you don't change your fucking mind, I'm going to the 11th Circuit." And then something else happened. Maybe you can tell us what happened yesterday with Aileen Cannon.
Yeah, remember what this case is about is selective prosecution. That's what the Trump side is claiming. This is selective prosecution, right? Which,
Right.
of course, it isn't.
No.
But the problem with Aileen Cannon, one of the many problems, is that she's a brand new judge. She has Trump appointed about a year before this all came down, and she just really hasn't tried that many cases, so she just doesn't have a track record. However, Jack Smith, and this is why, in this case at least, Merrick Garland picked the right guy. Maybe he doesn't like Trump because what Jack Smith did was look at her record as a federal prosecutor. And he found, oh, look, she prosecuted some people, two guys involved in a robbery, a bank robbery, I believe it was, for selective prosecution. Oh, and here's her argument, which he included in his brief. So she was, as they say, lifted on her own petard, to get Shakespearean about it, and so she basically couldn't argue against herself in a conflicting opinion. So it was a masterstroke on Jack Smith's part, to find that, first of all, and utilize it in this way. So I'm thinking the trial is going to go forward now, because on March 12th it should be, I do believe. So I think that's the case. That's what's happened so far, and that way he won't even have to have the 11th Circuit involved.
Well, yeah, I think he sent a message, and even she wasn't stupid enough to miss it. She not only doesn't have a lot of experience as a judge in trials, she doesn't have a lot of experience as a lawyer in trials. She was cherry picked just basically because they knew she could be handled. And I've said all along, people always say, "Why isn't Jack Smith doing something? Why isn't she kicked off the case?" And I've said all along, Jack Smith is a smart, calculating, maybe even ruthless motherfucker, that he was setting traps and he was biding his time. He wasn't going to jump too fast, and he was going to do it at the right time. And I still am not sure that she won't be kicked off the case, but Donald Trump recently asked for a delay, as they are wont to do, and she said no. This has got to be kind of stinging to Trump's team, who are used to getting their way with Aileen Cannon, but Aileen Cannon is obviously seeing the writing on the wall. Jack Smith's not fucking around. He's way smarter than I am, and I could ruin my career if I continue down this path. Now, I would have thought she would have saw that before we even got to this stage, but apparently she's thicker than we thought. But I think she's finally getting a come to Jesus moment. That doesn't mean she's going to do a good job and not get kicked off, but at least he's kind of neutralized her a little bit.
Yeah, we can only hope, but that's a really good sign. I mean, you keep I keep seeing, these quote legal authorities on MSNBC and elsewhere lamenting the timeline, and oh, they may never be able to get this done before the election and so forth. But number one, I don't, like you, I don't think it matters. I do not think Trump will be reelected regardless. But let's put the icing on the cake here. Let's get him convicted. I mean, obviously, he's going to get smeared today, financially.
Yeah,
he's going to get his butt kicked.
yeah.
Now, I've heard that one of the reasons that they're looking for a new chairman for the RNC is that the current one has given Trump so much money for his legal bills that the RNC is now effectively broke. They have no money for other candidates.
No,
because
I mean,
they've been propping up Donald Trump.
they have $8 million going into the presidential election season. And just to give a comparison,
Yeah.
the DNC has 117 million. So that's quite, imagine that. They not only have to deal with the presidential election, but they often help out other races that are important to them. $8 million, that doesn't pay for Donald Trump's McDonald's bill over the next 9 months. But you know what he's doing now?
It's not cab fare.
He wants her out, which she's going to be out, and wants to put his daughter-in-law in as a co-chair of the thing. And you can see what he's fucking doing. He's trying to make this as his money-making machine for himself. So what his intention is to take the RNC, take all the money it gathers, and funnel it to him, which should be a red flag to the Republicans.
That's right, because last time around he had his pack where he was going to send all this money to other candidates, and he just kept it all.
Yeah,
they might have been able to win in Georgia if he had put money into the Georgia races, but he didn't. He hung on to it, and as you say, he wants to put Laura Trump in there, who has far as I know, no accomplishments of any kind that would qualify her to be chairman of a homecoming committee, much less be the co-chair of the RNC. But also remember that the Republicans just put a chunk of change in that election they lost in New York.
Right.
They really spent heavily trying to hang on to the seat that George Santos vacated, and all of that was wasted money, as we saw.
Yeah, it was wasted money, and it's not surprising that they lost again. The last thing I want to bring up as we're coming to the end of the show is maybe one of the most important news stories. I get people all the time saying, "Oh no, what if the trials don't start before the election and end before the election? What's going to happen?" I think we're getting close to getting some movement on the DC thing. The Supreme Court has to come back and say, we're not going to take this. I don't imagine they're going to take it with all the other shit they have going on. And then Donald Trump's stuck. The DC case will start, but it won't start in March 4th like we suspected. It's going to probably be end of May, maybe early June, which is a delay. But the interesting thing is people forgot about the Manhattan District case. They were always going to do it on March 25th, but as soon as they found out that DC was going to do it on March 4th, they were going to step back. But by being delayed in Washington, D.C., all of a sudden a window opened up. And Alan Bragg says, yeah, we're going on the 25th. They went to the Judge Juan Marchand, and they tried to get it delayed. But before they can even ask for it to get delayed, he started the hearing off by saying, we're going with March 25th. And of course, Donald Trump's people were upset about it. But that was the date that was set initially, so nobody should have any argument. The point is Donald Trump, in that case with Alvin Bragg, has 34 felony charges against him. Now, people have said this might be a hard case to try. It's not as serious as the other ones. Doesn't fucking matter. If we can get one or two convictions out of the 34 charges, which I'm sure we will, regardless of how hard people say it is, Trump is fucking done. Then the rest of it is just kicking a dead horse or trying to skin a husk that has no meat left on it.
Yeah, I'm confident that one is going to be if nothing else happens, that one is going to go to trial, and Trump will lose.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I would like to throw in real quick before we go. Now, the Fed just said, no, we're not going to lower interest rates right now because inflation didn't drop as much as the rate of inflation didn't drop as much as we wanted to. Okay. Right. Now, I don't know if you're looking at this, but the inflation we're seeing now, at least 50% of it is corporate profit driven. That means simply that there was legitimate inflation caused by COVID with the backlog of ships not being able to get in and a number of other things. So the prices did go up for production to a certain extent. But even then, 50% of that was simply because they could use that as an excuse to raise prices. Now, let's use Pepsi and Coke, for example, because they're my favorite whipping boys. They both raised prices. Collusion, that's called. Yeah. When you have two separate corporations raise prices approximately the same amount at the same time, that's simply collusion. That's what they did. You raise yours, you raise mine. We've divided the market. We both make billions of dollars, so it's all cool, right? Well, everybody's doing that, and that's because all of our food is controlled by about 5 or 6 corporations. Right. So all they have to do is nod at each other, and up goes the price. Now that also benefits Donald Trump because people look at say, oh, my grocery bill's double what it was when Trump was in there, so it's got to be Biden's fault. It's not. Corporations support oligarchs. Trump is an oligarch. The corporations are supporting him. We just had the CEO of PepsiCo the other day say, no, we're not going to lower prices now because inflation is going down. And his reason was, we have popular products.
Yeah.
We deserve the profits that we make.
Yeah.
Your products are only popular because you control the market and nobody else. There is no competition within the food industry anymore. People talk about the free market. There is no free market without competition, and it's been totally stifled. Before Teddy Roosevelt was president, it was a similar thing. He got his big stick and he busted up the trusts and the monopolies, and it has to happen again. But right now, they're supporting Donald Trump for president, and that's why your prices are high. It has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It never did. It's all corporate support for Donald Trump. Take it to the bank. It's true.
Well, you
Now,
know,
if let's just for the rational boomer people, okay? I want you to go to the store. Whenever you go to the store, do not buy a Pepsi product. Look at PepsiCo. Go to the PepsiCo website. Find out who their other Minute Maid or whatever their other brands are. Do not buy anything that PepsiCo is associated with. We're doing a boycott here. Okay,
that
we're
sounds good, man.
boycotting PepsiCo. Let's see if we can get their attention.
Well, and I have occasion to buy Diet Pops, Diet Pepsi frequently, and you know, the only time I buy it is when there's deals, because if you go in and buy a 12 pack of pop from your local convenience store or something, it's fucking $9-10 for a 12 pack. That's fucking ridiculous. And I shouldn't be drinking Diet Pop at this point, or soda, or however you want to call it, because we have people all over the country. It is a bad thing. But, you know, the thing about Republicans, they keep ranting about, well, they just want to put regulations on. We got to get rid of regulations. That's what's best for the country. The reason you're paying high prices now is because lack of regulations. The regulations that Republicans took off give these people free reign to do whatever they fucking want. And like Ed pointed out, we're talking about collusion. And in anybody's book, that's fucking illegal. But because of no regulations, they get away with it.
Yeah, I would do Amazon instead, but there's some stuff I want to buy.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it's
No,
impossible. Like you say, there's no competition. So where do you
yeah,
go? Back
exactly.
when I was a kid, I go to my grandfather and grandmother's house, and they'd always have a whole refrigerator full of pop, soda, whatever you call it. And
Yeah.
they never had Pepsi, they never had Coke, they never had any of the name brands. They went to a big kind of superstore, kind of discount store, and they would buy something called Elf Pop. It was lime and
Yes, I've seen
cola
it.
and
Yeah.
orange. And I mean, it was cheap as shit. And I would go there,
Yeah.
and being a little kid, I was happy to drink any fucking pop. I didn't care what the name brand was. But maybe that's what people need to do, is buy some of the off-brand stuff and fuck Pepsi and Coca-Cola, because the prices do keep going way up, and it's like a frog being boiled in water. You don't know it until you're really getting fucking burned, and
Yeah.
by that time it's too late.
Well, it's across the board too. I mean, I checked. I looked at my grocery tags for pre-pandemic versus post. Pre-pandemic, I was spending about $70 per visit to the grocery store. Now, typically, I'm anywhere from 125 to 150 for
That's
the
significant.
same stuff.
That's significant. That's more than
Yeah,
50%.
it's double. It
Yeah.
is double. Yeah, and half of that at least is corporate profits. All corporate profits across the board are sky high, and when that happens, it ain't inflation, folks.
Right, exactly.
It's corporate greed.
It is. And they get away with it because of no regulations and no enforcement of regulations that
Yes.
actually exist. And that's something we have to address. Well, Ed, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. I was hoping at some point during this during this podcast that we'd get some indication as to what Judge Engoron has decided as far as how much Donald Trump has paid. But we know it's coming today, so people will have already heard about it because I'll add an addendum to this podcast talking about that just so we're up to date. But Ed, thanks very much for coming by. We always appreciate hearing your input. I get a lot of emails. People love you, and God knows why. But but once again, why don't you tell folks where they can find you on the internet so they can benefit in your wisdom?
Okay, at Holler Troll, HOLLERTROLL, at TikTok. I'm also on YouTube. I do a thing called Reelin in the Years, REALIN. I know it's Reelin, REELIN, when it's Steely Dan, but I play on words, Reelin in the Years. At Holler Troll on YouTube.
Don't hate
and
Ed.
It's essentially the same stuff.
Don't hate Ed because he's clever. Just don't hate him because he's clever. Says the guy who has a show called Rational Boomer. Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks very much.
Well.
Yeah, we're old. We're not hip like we once were. I'm trying to remember when that was, but
no, if we ever were.
Not in recent memory, no.
Maybe disco.
Yeah, the disco era. I was one bad motherfucker then. I didn't dance. I stood next to the wall waiting for the. I was basically.
I'm picturing you in a pink leisure suit.
Oh, I had the baggy pants and the cuffs and the platform shoes and the puffy shirt, and we go to dances. And the only time I could dance was if it was a slow dance, because any idiot can slow dance. But otherwise, I'd be standing against the wall, and I always felt like I was in the jungle, trying to meet girls. And you'd watch, and they're dancing with all the guys that can dance, and I'm like a old lion on the left side, waiting for a lame one to come by who would actually talk to me. So it was a horrible circumstance.
Well, the thing was, all the good dancing guys were gay.
Well, I hate to say it, but when we were young, that's what we would say. It was a much different time. But I always hated the guys that were good dancers. I fucking hated them because I couldn't dance. Even if I tried, I could not dance. And that's a hell of a thing to have happen to you in an era where it's all about dance in terms of disco. I could put on the costume. I could drink like a fish, but you can't get me dancing. Not a dancer.
Well, see, I really hated disco because up until that point, I could do a modified twist thing, but then with the hustle and all of that stuff, you actually had to be able to dance.
Yeah, when you had to think about it, have some coordination and some rhythm, that's where I fell out. I guess I did the twist a little bit when I was a little kid, but yeah, when it got more complicated, I was out. Just get me a beer and I'll just hang out here and see if someone feels sorry enough for me to talk to me. And fortunately, I found one person and I married her for the last 40 years.
There you go. See, it all worked out.
It all worked out. It was God's plan. All right. Thank you very much for coming in, Ed. For the folks listening, thank you for taking the time to listen. Hope you have a great day. And we will talk to you again tomorrow, if not sooner, with regards to Judge Engoron. So we'll talk to you soon.